Something big is going on in the American real estate industry. And no, I'm not talking about house prices. There's this quiet, almost invisible earthquake happening behind the scenes, and it's causing hundreds of the organizations that agents rely on to just vanish. Let's dig into the numbers because they're pretty wild.
Okay, so what you're looking at is the number 484. That is the total number of multiple listing services, or MLSs, currently operating in the entire United States. And for the first time in decades, it's that low. Now, if that number doesn't immediately jump out at you, it really should, because just a few years ago, it was way, way higher.
And what makes that so stunning is just how fast it's happening. We are talking about a 5.8% drop in a single year. That is the steepest, most dramatic decline that T360 has ever recorded since they started tracking this stuff. So the big question is, what on earth is going on here?
To really get it, we have to look at what's being called real estate's big squeeze. And trust me, this isn't just some minor market adjustment. This is a fundamental contraction of the industry's entire backbone.
What's so interesting is that this has been happening for a while, but the speed has just hit the accelerator. If you look back to 2015, the industry was at its peak with about 850 MLSs. By 2020, that number had already fallen to around 600. But to drop all the way to 484 now, that's just, whoa. In about a decade, we've watched over 350 of these organizations disappear.
And this whole trend really comes down to one thing: survival of the biggest. There are these incredibly powerful forces at play that are pushing smaller organizations to either merge into a bigger one or just vanish completely.
And this quote from Clint Scutchin over at T360 just nails it. See, a cyclical contraction would just be a normal dip, because of the economy. But structural consolidation, that means the very foundation of the industry is being rebuilt. The old rules just don't apply anymore.
So, why now? Well, it's a perfect storm, really. Smaller groups are getting absolutely crushed by rising legal fees and super complex compliance rules. They just can't afford to keep up with the constant demand for new, shiny tech that agents need to compete. And at the end of the day, it's about managing risk and just staying in business. In today's world, being big isn't just an advantage, it's pretty much a requirement for survival.
So, okay, enough with the high-level stuff. What does this squeeze actually look like for the people on the ground? Well, it's really a tale of two very different endings. Huge mergers, and in some cases, just lights out.
And this isn't happening evenly across the country, not by a long shot. More than half of all the MLS closures in the last year happened in just 3 states. Texas is basically ground zero, making up a full third of all the closings. Then you've got New York and Georgia following right behind.
And you can really see the two extremes here. On one side, you have a mega merger like Metrotex in Texas, which created this absolute behemoth of an organization with almost 40,000 members. And then on the other side, you have the tiny Clarksdale Board of Realtors in Mississippi. With as few as 10 members, they just dissolved. They ceased to exist.
And here's the really crucial part. The Clarksdale Board isn't some weird, isolated case. Right now, about 1 out of every 3 local realtor associations has fewer than 250 members. They basically live and die by dues and fees, which makes them incredibly vulnerable when costs go up or the market gets shaky.
But here's where the story takes a really fascinating turn. We're calling it the agent paradox. Because, with all these organizations just disappearing, you'd think there'd be a mass exodus of real estate agents, right?
So that's the logical question, isn't it? If hundreds of their professional groups are gone, are agents just leaving the business in droves? Well, the data tells a completely different story.
And here is the answer. Despite all of this chaos, the number of individual agents has been incredibly stable. It only dropped by about 2.2%. I mean, that's barely a blip compared to the massive nosedive we've seen in the number of organizations.
And that is what we mean by resilience. The agents themselves aren't going anywhere. They're just ending up in these new, bigger organizations. So the story isn't about agents fleeing the industry. It's about the industry itself reorganizing around them into fewer but much more powerful hubs.
So, where is all of this headed? What does this mean for the future of the industry? And maybe most importantly, what's next for the individual realtor trying to make a living in this brand new landscape? Well, the new power structure is already here. Get this, just 20 MLSs, that's only 4% of the total, now serve half of all real estate agents in the entire country. And it gets crazier. A tiny group of just 12 associations serves 20% of all realtors. The power is concentrating at the very top, and it's happening fast.
Which really leaves us with this one final critical question.
As the dust settles from this great real estate shrink, and individual agents find themselves as one of 40,000 members instead of one of 40, what does that future actually look like? Is it a future with more resources and better tech, or is it one with less local control and a voice that gets harder and harder to hear? That right there is the billion-dollar question.